Back to today's video. Today is Monday, February 3rd, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the DNC chair elections and their relationship now with Vice President Kamala Harris as she tells the DNC candidates before they are elected, and I'm sure in the aftermath, that she plans to work closely with now elected chair Ken Martin as they look ahead to the 2025, 2026, 2027, and yes, of course, the 2028 races that the Democratic Party are going to be looking to for victories and for changes in their party that could likely springboard them ahead into winning in future elections, even past the 2028 election year. Ken Martin, the former chair now, of the Minnesota DFL, the Minnesota Democratic Party, he served in that position for 14 years and won a decisive victory at the Gaylord National Hotel in Maryland, my home state. Huge shout out to Maryland. Won the DNC chair elections with 55% of the vote, to his runner-up at 30%, and the third place candidate at 10% in what was a pretty big sweep in expectation, despite many national endorsements from many prominent Democrats endorsing Ken Martin's opponent, Ben Wickler. But the topic of this video is not about the DNC chair election as much as it is more about Kamala Harris and her involvement in future Democratic politics. I've spent the past week talking about the DNC chair elections, and I think it's only fitting to discuss something that hasn't been really covered too much by the mainstream media, in that Kamala Harris said explicitly that she wants to work closely over the coming years with this DNC party chair. Now, that matters for a number of different reasons. We've started to see the former vice president has built back up a lot of what she had been doing on social media, starting to get tweets out there, Instagram posts, sort of things that you would find signaling that they aren't done in politics. It's unlike what we saw from Hillary Clinton after the 2017 election, or really any former presidential candidate who lost an election. And looking back at the 2024 race, given that it was a decisive victory for Donald Trump, many people had expected that Kamala Harris would retire from politics. But she has made it clear in her days after the election, when she was still in the administration, and especially now that her personal office and those who have been keeping up this activity and her closest advisors have all been reiterating one thing: Kamala Harris is not done yet. So a lot of you guys also have been asking in some of my comments, why is it that I'm still making videos talking about the former vice president when she isn't running for anything yet? Well, as of right now, besides Ken Martin, there is no clear party leader for the Democratic Party. Despite a lot of these names, such as Pete Buttigieg, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro, being floated for the 2028 election, none of them have as high name ID as Kamala Harris, and still, in the aftermath of an election, people often look to the former candidate for direction for how the party should go. After all, after Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, the Republican Party looked at him for direction all the way through an election that he ended up winning in 2024. Kamala Harris, not to say that she will repeat that, nor do I think that we're at a point where we can say definitively if she will run for president or run for another elected office. One thing is pretty certain: she will not go quietly into the night. And so looking at the DNC elections here with Ken Martin, overall Politico says Ken Martin, obviously the winner. He won the DNC chair election. But in the same headline, there is no other Democrat who is mentioned besides Kamala Harris. And let's take a look at exactly why that is. When you take a look at their five main takeaways, they talk about billionaires, they talk about Harris, they talk about the DNC, they talk about diversity, they talk about the primary calendar battle, things related to, problems that Jamie Harrison was tackling with South Carolina and New Hampshire, past issues, but also upcoming issues. This question about the inclusion and diversity, not only within the Democratic Party, but of course, nationally speaking. But I want to focus in on this point about Kamala Harris and, pretty much what they seem to have taken away from this big congregation of the party's most elite and the party's most, well-versed people in politics and campaigns, and what they thought about the former vice president. So what we know definitively is that Kamala Harris called the three frontrunners. That was Ben Wickler, the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, Martin O'Malley, who was the governor of Maryland, and Ken Martin, who ended up winning the DNC chair election. She privately called all three of them, spoke for about 15 to 20 minutes, probably extensively about, what your plans are. She made it clear from the beginning she was not endorsing in this race. Her running mate, Tim Walz, also said he was not going to endorse, but ended up endorsing Ken Martin, so maybe there was some hope out there from any of these candidates that she would endorse. Obviously did not endorse, but Politico says smart politics, and that's a pretty obvious answer too. But a big reason why they take her away as someone who is considered to be a force is that they were judging based on the way that all of these different Democratic elites and Democratic voting members interacted with the speeches and the, mainstream Democrats that were speaking to these DNC delegates. They were talking about how Kamala Harris received the most cheers amongst any of the Democrats, and it was clear that there was a lot of enthusiasm for her, at least amongst the party base. And this sort of tracks. When you take a look at 2028 opinion polling, not necessarily the general election, though I will say there are some who would probably point at this and say Kamala Harris is in a better position than some other Democrats. Obviously, a lot of this has to do with lack of name ID. In no circumstance is J.D. Vance getting 37% of the vote and Gavin Newsom getting 34% of the vote. Obviously they would do a lot better than that. But in Democratic primary polling, this is where you really start to see that Kamala Harris does shine through. Roughly a week ago, there was a poll from McConnell and Associates, the first poll conducted after Donald Trump had been inaugurated, and no candidate comes close to Kamala Harris. She's at 33%, Pete Buttigieg is at 9%, and then everybody else sort of fizzles off. Newsom at 7%, AOC at 6%, Shapiro at 3%, Walz at 3%. It's clear that she's the frontrunner. And it isn't just one poll. I'm not trying to cherry pick data here. You can see on the screen, it is every single poll that has been conducted post-election, even pre-election, that Harris was the favorite in the 2028 Democratic primary. And the extent at which she is popular doesn't just stop on the national level, and I guess that doesn't really make sense. So it doesn't just end when we're looking at national polling data. A lot of it comes down to her home state of California, where a recent poll from the LA Times, I guess if I can go ahead and get this to wipe away here, but you can find that Kamala Harris holds a clear advantage on a crowded California gubernatorial race. So her options very much are open. Whether or not she should be running or can run, these are different questions that people will talk about, they will discuss, but as of right now, it is clear she has two very clear venues to exert her political capital. One could be in her home state of California. She announced she was going to be residing in LA. Some people saw that as an indication that she might run for governor. On the other hand, we might be seeing a national push for Kamala Harris, especially given that she is now saying that she is going to work closely with these DNC chairs. It's not so often that you find governors, people who want to run for governor or any statewide elected office saying, I want to work closely with you on the national level, right? Kamala Harris probably wouldn't be saying that unless she had some type of national ambition. Now, does this mean that she could be taking a step back from elected office and trying to lead the party from the sidelines? That's very possible. Hillary Clinton still remains to be a well-respected leader within the Democratic Party amongst the base, goes on to different media hits, calls out Donald Trump, did a number of things for Biden in 2020. And so Hillary Clinton, on her own end, right, did in fact take a step away from elected office. People tried to push her to run for mayor of New York City. People tried to push her to run for Senate again, to run for governor. She was never going to do it. She made that very clear from the beginning in a way that Kamala Harris is not, and did in fact do very similar things. She did in fact say she wanted to work closely with Tom Perez, or at least that's what the expectations were, that she would work closely with Tom Perez. The whole idea here was that it was Perez, versus Ellison. It was Hillary versus Bernie. It was going to be centrist Democrat versus progressive Democrat. Tom Perez, endorsed by Obama and Biden, ended up winning. Still, Hillary Clinton took that sideline role. I do not see that presently from Kamala Harris. And I think that's why this DNC chair election, and even just the, reporting on the fact that they spoke, speaks wonders, right? There isn't any reporting that Biden spoke with these candidates. Obviously, he congratulated the candidates and eventually did, in fact, get to have a say. But Kamala Harris being the reported on one and getting all this media speculation and all this conversation, and then Politico saying that she was the winner on Saturday alongside the DNC chair when she wasn't even there in person, only had a pre-recorded message, but you could still feel the energy and that it was palpable amongst the Democratic base. It all correlates and corresponds with the numbers we've been seeing nationally, the numbers we've been seeing in California. I mean, it is point after point after point that shows that even if there is a situation where Kamala Harris says, I'm not running for elected office moving forward, it is clear, I think, that the Democratic base, at least some parts of it, want her to run. Does this mean the majority does? No, right? She's at 33%. That means 67% saw Kamala Harris's name as an option for the Democratic primary and decided to not choose her. It doesn't mean they're in opposition to her, and this is the big problem, with trying to discuss early polls enough to say that it means the majority is against her. No. She has a clear advantage, and generally speaking, as time goes on and as name ID rises for these candidates, the percentage only increases for the frontrunner as well as the other candidates. It's not as if she's going to stay at 33 and Newsom's going to be at 67 or Walz is going to be at 67 or Shapiro's going to be at 67. It's more of the fact that all this right now probably has a lot of hesitancy. The other category in the undecided probably is coming from a lot of Democrats who are saying, let's wait and see, but I'm not writing off anyone yet. And that's where Kamala Harris really can get to that 50%, 60% mark that could lead her into a decisive primary victory, just as Donald Trump had in the 2024 race. And so I, again, have been very interested to see what exactly Kamala Harris is going to do next. She already established Pioneer 49. We covered this in a recent video, which is a new LLC that is being devoted to, moving around the vice president, getting her back involved in electoral politics, whether locally or nationally. We are seeing clear signs that Kamala Harris is not done yet. And I think the clearest sign as of recent is this DNC chair election, where this has been reported on. And this has been very clear that she wants to have involvement in the future of the Democratic Party, at least in the extent as it relates to the DNC, which only really operates primarily on the national level. And so I think that's a better indicator, which really throws me in for a loop as to what she is going to decide to do. I really don't know. I think Kamala Harris is at that crossroads point. We've talked about it extensively. I don't need to rehash it again, but there are options here. There are options that could result in a future election victory, a future election loss for Kamala Harris, and these are the things that her family, her closest advisors, those in the party are going to evaluate and likely move forward with public opinions on in a year from now, public opinions on in 2 years from now. And I do think this, though. And I think I can say this, pretty confidently, just looking at it from what she has been doing behind the scenes that is being discussed and reported on. Maybe there are some things, and there definitely are things that are being discussed and things that we don't know about that aren't public to the press. But here's what I think. Should Kamala Harris run for governor of California? Chances are she does not run for president. Should she pass up the run for governor? I think she's running for president. I think that she is going to pursue future elected office. I think it would be something, she's 60 years old, which sounds, 5 years off of retirement age, but in politics, 20 years off of retirement age. And, when it comes down to where she stands within the party, she's not in a weak point like Hillary Clinton was in 2020, right? The only polls that even included Hillary Clinton in the aftermath of the 2016 election had her at most at 17, 18% nationally, never more than that, and it was never a serious possibility. This is a serious possibility, and voters are engaging with her, arguably, in a similar way to that they engaged Donald Trump with on the Republican side in 2021 in the aftermath of his loss. A lot of hesitancy and a lot of hype around other candidates. Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, all these other people who might be able to serve in opposition to him. They received some attention. Voters ended up realizing that they liked the candidate that they had nominated prior to. Now, Kamala Harris was the incumbent for 106 days practically. She didn't go through a traditional primary process. The delegates moved from Biden to Harris because she was on the ticket. She was nominated at the convention. So this will be the first primary that she will be running in since 2019. And so it would be interesting to see, if she decides to run for president, how she gets through this primary, when and what state she wins, what state she loses, how she performs nationally. These are going to be a lot of questions. It'll be very fascinating to watch her on a debate stage that isn't one-to-one against, Mike Pence, that isn't one-to-one against Donald Trump, because she did that in 2019, dropped out before any primaries had taken place. So this will be the first real test for Kamala Harris on the national level should she decide to run. And indicators right now put me about 50-50 between governor and president. A week ago, I would have told you, looks much more likely that it's going to be governor of California. Today, I think it stands to be much more competitive between the two as to what she decides to do. So some early signs here, some things that we can sort of take away reading the tea leaves, because that's all you can do 4 years out, 3 years out from an election. But it'll be very, very interesting to watch over the next, 1,400 days of the second Trump administration, what Kamala Harris's position is within the Democratic Party, how she serves in opposition, and how she maintains her pretty dominant political presence on the Democratic Party right now, and if that means that there's going to be a more clear frontrunner over the coming years for 2028, or whether or not she'll just swoop up the California governorship in less than 2. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 post-election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.